Sox already have star Rafael Devers at third base, so where Bregman will play in the infield still needs to be resolved. Right-hander Nick Pivetta and the Padres have agreed to a 4-year, $55 million deal. It's pending following the completion of a physical exam. The veteran righty played in the last 4 seasons for the Red Sox. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney was arrested last week in Georgia. He was booked in a Douglas County facility on February the 6th on counts of aggravated assault, strangulation, and obstructing, harassing 911 calls. Bundle auto and home, renters, or condo and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Ever have one of those days where your gut just feels blah?
Ugh, yes.
Occasional bloating or gas could be signs that your gut is out of balance, but Align Probiotic can help. Align 24/7 Digestive Support is a daily use probiotic with a unique strain to help relieve occasional digestive issues. It's the #1 doctor-recommended brand. So when you feel the signs, it's time to try Align. Align Probiotic. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time. The next time you're out to dinner with friends, you can order the shrimp cocktail for the table. And maybe you'll realize it only comes with 4 shrimp after you've already given away 3, but that one shrimp will be so good. And if you switch and save hundreds, you could get shrimp all the time. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For shrimp, Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
How many SportsGrid listeners does it take to change a light bulb?
It takes 2.
1 to change the light bulb, and 1 to see if our mobile app can provide the same amount of light. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
We are live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC all across the SportsGrid Radio Network and Sirius XM Channel 159. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. In this next hour, plenty to get into around the National Football League with some quarterback news. One official from the NFL franchise itself. The other, some rumors and speculations starting to spread about a potential blockbuster deal at the quarterback spot. We'll discuss if it's even realistic or makes sense for either side involved between the Steelers and the Jaguars. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Scott, an hour here on FFC with a lot to dive into. Quarterback news officially out of the New York Jets. The rumored trade, or at least the Steelers inquiring about the availability of Trevor Lawrence, who we spent much of yesterday's show discussing at length. The NFL Combine list, the players invited to Indianapolis in just a few weeks, officially released, and a former NFL coach making his way to college football. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. All of that, though, you can expect over this next hour.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, Ben. The NFL, we all know, is king, right? They just overwhelm everyone. But there's 2 things that they kind of lack that other sports maybe have an advantage over them. One is the All-Star game, right? I think as a consensus, the NFL Pro Bowl is probably the worst out of all 4 major sports, right? The other one really is trades. You know, the NBA, we just got through the NBA trade deadline and all the great moves and Luka and this and that stealing the headlines. NHL's coming up next month. Baseball, we know at the end of July is always feverish pitch. People talking about who's going where, this, that, what have you. Football doesn't. Yeah. It really doesn't have that. It really doesn't. You know, it's rare when you see an NFL trade. So this is the one thing that they're kind of lacking versus, you know, there's not many, like I said, over the other sports. And then maybe the NFL this offseason will pick things up a little bit. We'll get a bunch of deals, or at least rumored deals that may or may not go down.
The offseason calendar always has something at the end of this month. It's the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, the official list of the 329 prospects invited to work out in Indy, meet with NFL organizations, forecast their future. That has been released. In March, it's free agency, it's franchise tags, it's maybe some of those blockbuster deals. In April, it's the NFL draft, and then so on and so forth. Scott, although we got word over the weekend of these reports that Aaron Rodgers had flown back to New Jersey to meet with the Jets late last week and had been informed by the team that they were moving in a different direction at the quarterback spot, The Jets make that official from their own in-house brass today, releasing a statement just about an hour ago, a joint statement from head coach Aaron Glenn and new GM Darren Muge, alongside a statement from team owner in Woody Johnson. This is the statement from Glenn and Muge, that new brass for the New York Jets. Quote, last week, we met with Aaron and shared that our intention was to move in a different direction at quarterback. It was important to have this discussion now to provide clarity and enable each of us the proper time to plan our respective futures. We want to thank him for the leadership, passion, and dedication he brought to the organization and wish him success moving forward. The end of that quote from the statement released by new head coach in New York, Aaron Glenn, and new Jets GM, Darren Muge. Again, Scott, we had this report. It is not shocking. It's not breaking news that they released this statement, but it has now been made official from the Jets themselves. They are going a different direction at the quarterback spot, and Aaron Rodgers no longer a part of their future.
Yeah, it was a great plan, Ben. On paper, it was a real. Let's bring in Aaron Rodgers. He's got a couple of years left. We got some talent on the team. We'll bring in his boys over. We'll do everything we can to make life here in New York / New Jersey, a happy place for him. He can do whatever he wants. He bought in. They bought in. The fans bought in. And then 2 years later, we look back and it was as bad as you could ever envision it. Right? I mean, the first series going down last year was just comical. It really was. And then this year, they really didn't even give it that long before they fired their head coach. 5 games in, I mean, It's just like they made up their mind maybe after last season. It's a weird thing, right? You would think they would have been bought in and just said, all right, we're going to give it a full year, but they didn't even do that. Then they fire the GM a couple of weeks later, and the whole thing implodes without it really realistically having a shot. So, yeah, we had heard about him, being let go. And now whether he finds a home or not, I don't know. There's all kind of goofy stories. I heard one yesterday about how he would go to Tennessee because one of the executives there in Tennessee was with him in Green Bay. It's like, Tennessee? I mean, why in the world would he go to Tennessee? But we'll see if he wants. I think he wants to play, Ben. It's a matter of, is there a team that wants him? These guys all have egos, right? He doesn't want to tell the world, I want to play, and yet no team comes a calling. So he's got to play that game of, I got to decide as well. Meanwhile, I think his agent is putting out feelers and seeing if there's any interest out there for him. There's not that many openings. There really isn't. Unless someone makes a move to create an opening, if you just look at the teams now, Ben, that there's no realistic match to me, for like a semi-win now team. Versus, having all these openings like we had last year.
Yeah, and Scott, it's a great point, right? And if there is an opening or a question for a team to answer at their quarterback spot, is Aaron Rodgers worth it? Would he be tabbed the immediate starter? Would Aaron Rodgers be interested, even if at all, if he has to be in a quarterback competition throughout off-season OTAs and training camp? I don't know necessarily. He is 41 years old. He has spent 2 decades, 20 years in the National Football League. Scott, just for the logistics of this all, the Jets have made their official declaration that Aaron Rodgers is not coming back, and Ian Rappaport clarifying that per NFL rules, if a club announces that they are terminating a vested veteran, other clubs are able to talk to him. No tryout, however, or signing is permitted. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be released by the New York Jets until the league year begins on June 1st, we would think, unless they want to take in a ton of dead cap space, which I don't think would be anybody's benefit. But he can now, Aaron Rodgers, if he is continuing his football career, I'm sure still mulling over retirement, he can speak to other clubs. They can put out those feelers and see where some realistic opportunities are going to lie. Scott, I think that is the question, right? 41 years old. Is he a clear-cut starter in the NFL anymore? Perhaps. Is there that opportunity for him that would make him the starter day number 1 when he walks into the facility, as he has been for the last 15 years of his NFL career? I'm not so sure. And I wonder, Aaron Rodgers, who of course has a rather large ego, how that will all go into factoring his decision to come back to the NFL or retire. Scott, there's an idea when you are one of the greatest to do it at your position, at this level. You want to kind of go out on your own terms. The Jets making this decision for Aaron Rodgers, not exactly his terms. Does he still want to give it a go one more year in the NFL? There were some reports that because he took the trip to New Jersey to even meet with the Jets in the first place, it shows he has interest in playing in the NFL next season.
Yeah, I mean, I would think he would. I mean, who wants to go out like last year, right? But I will say this. If you look at his stats, forget about his play, right? If you just look at his numbers, you know who he reminds me of? Russell Wilson 2 years ago. I mean, he had very similar numbers with the Denver Broncos, but if you watch the Broncos with Russell Wilson, it was like, wow, not happening, right? And if you watch the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, so many games, 5-6 games where he had the ball needing only a field goal to tie the game, and he couldn't get it done. And that's when, crunch time is when it really counts, right? So, but the numbers weren't bad with 28 touchdown passes, 13 13 interceptions, threw for nearly 4,000 yards. I mean, those are not horrible numbers. So, I mean, he shows some ability, but it would take, like I said, a team to maneuver around who they have now, I think, in order to bring him in.
One final reflection on the Rodgers era in New York, all that was invested into Aaron Rodgers, and the lack of success that follows, and also what the Jets' plan is now at the quarterback position. Up next on Football Full Circle.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid, and we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin. He just gives that vibe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
This week, a Texas county approved holding an election sought by SpaceX that would let residents living around Elon Musk's company decide whether to formally create a new city called Starbase. This update brought to you by Sky Rizzy. Explore proven results with Sky Rizzy. The election was set for May 3rd, and votes can only be cast by residents living near the launch site that is currently part of an unincorporated area of Cameron County located along the U.S.-Mexico border. The port of Brunswick in Georgia became the top U.S. seaport for automobiles last year, surpassing the port of Baltimore after it shut down for weeks following the deadly bridge collapse. Georgia Ports Authority CEO Griff Lynch made the announcement during a luncheon speech in Brunswick, a small coastal city of 15,000 that state officials have turned into a leading gateway for automobile imports and exports, as well as farm and construction equipment. Brunswick's port moved 841,000 cars and trucks across its docks in the 2024 calendar year. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Now's the time to shop limited-time doorbuster deals during Pro Savings Days at Lowe's. Save $50 on a Little Giant King Combo 6-foot ladder. Was $199, now $149. Plus, save $100 on a DeWalt XR 20-volt Power Stack 5-amp-hour battery. Was $199, now $99. Get these can't-miss deals now before they're gone. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. Doorbusters valid 113 through 115. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
Progressive presents Renter's MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Tom Kelly's carbon fiber mountain bike. Because more than riding his carbon fiber mountain bike, Tom loves telling people about his carbon fiber mountain bike. Friends, family, even a local barista knows about his carbon fiber mountain bike. And that's why Tom's carbon fiber mountain bike, if you haven't heard about it, is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
There's something you should know and always remember. SportsGrid does not increase luck. We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck, go find a horseshoe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. The Jets make it official. They are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. Earlier today, an official statement from team president and owner Woody Johnson, new head coach Aaron Glenn, and his new GM Darren Muge, that they are making the move from Aaron Rodgers, which, Scott, as we discussed, what is Rodgers' future in the National Football League? But let's look back one final time on what you can really only categorize as a disastrous 2-year run in New York. After the first 18 seasons of his NFL career, 15 consecutive as a starting quarterback in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, way back now in March of 2023, emerged out of the darkness and made his intent clear. He wanted to continue playing football, in doing so for the Jets. Scott, what might kind of be lost in that conversation, so he was a free agent and the Packers cut him, and he walked to New York? No, there had to be a trade. And then it took a long time for that actual trade to get done because who held the leverage between Green Bay and New York, so on and so forth. Ultimately, multiple second-round picks go back to Green Bay. The Jets restructured Aaron Rodgers' contract to the tune of around $75 million. Rodgers brought in basically everybody he was comfortable with: Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator. Then midway through this year, trying to put a Band-Aid over a gaping wound, they trade for Devontae Adams, spend another third-round pick, and additional money to get Devontae, only, Scott, for it to result in 2024 with just 5 wins, not to mention the 4 offensive snaps that Aaron Rodgers played in 2023's NFL season before rupturing his left Achilles. So in a 2-year span, with all that was invested by the New York Jets into Aaron Rodgers, all they have to show is 5 wins because of Aaron Rodgers and a 14th consecutive season missing out on the NFL playoffs.
It really is amazing. I mean, when you look back on the whole thing, all right, you make the run for it, and I get it. I didn't think it would be successful, but at least I understood why they were doing it and everything like that, right? Yeah. And then they give it really 5 games, 5-6 games, less than 2 months before they fired the head coach, and the whole thing. From that point on, it never got any better. Like sometimes you fire a head coach, and it's for the betterment, and you see the team turn things around. It never got any better. It just went downhill from there. So it really was just a disastrous try. It's just 2 years, and you're no better now than you were 2 years ago, and you can make the case you're worse. And the sad thing, Ben, is that's not a bad roster. It really isn't. This is not the Tennessee Titans. This is not the Las Vegas Raiders, where there's gaping holes all over the place. They got a number of number one draft choices on the offensive line. They got a big time running back. They got realistically 2. If they keep Adams, 2 big time wide receivers. That's a load of decent defense. That's a pretty good roster. And it's one of the reasons why they brought Rodgers in, thinking he was going to be the final piece of the puzzle, and it just never happened. And now they're like a lot of teams. Decent roster, but no quarterback. You could say that about 4 or 5 teams around the NFL. I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to go back to Sam Darnold? I really doubt that. I really do. Would they actually call up the Atlanta Falcons? Kirk Cousins apparently available. Go that route.
Right.
Another quarterback that's like win now. And that might be where they go, believe it or not.
Yeah, there's a lot that they could do, right, at that quarterback position. The decision, Scott, now as we focus on the Jets' future of what they are going to do at the QB spot. They don't have anybody in-house. Not Tyrod Taylor. More than likely not Jordan Travis, who, of course, was at Florida State and then suffered that gruesome knee injury, but had been on the roster this year. When you look at the GM now in place, Darren Mugie, what does he want to do in the draft? The Jets are not selecting by any means in a prime position, I believe 6th overall to be in consideration, or 7th overall in consideration for a quarterback. Scott, it's an interesting spot for the Jets, who have not figured out that quarterback puzzle, I mean, really in a long time, but certainly here as of late with all the talent they have had. 2018, 3rd overall pick, Sam Darnold. He's had success in other areas. Would Sam Darnold ever dream of coming back to MetLife to play for the Jets with a new regime? More than likely, that's a partnership that should not happen. But of course, in 2021, 2nd overall pick on Zach Wilson, that did not work either. Aaron Rodgers was seemingly the guy with all of his track record success and pedigree that could elevate a very young and talented roster. Obviously, did not work out. So that is a big question, Scott, for the Jets to answer at the quarterback spot. You would expect some sort of veteran move, free agent, if any are available, a trade somehow, some way. There doesn't seem to be many quarterbacks in this draft in where the Jets are picking that would be in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And it's funny because they do have, I think, a win now roster. So do you go get yourself a veteran quarterback? You go make a run for Russell Wilson if Pittsburgh's going to go away from him, or call up the Atlanta Falcons and ask about Kirk Cousins, who clearly is available right now. Or are there guys on rosters that you think, you know what, I kind of liked him coming out of college. I know it hasn't happened yet, but whether it's a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields, who's a free agent, with Pittsburgh, do you give a guy like that a flyer? I really did like Jordan Travis, but that's in college. You blow out your knee. But I really did like him in college. Now, whether he really has the arm strength in the NFL, I don't know about all that stuff, but I thought he was actually halfway decent. So, but I doubt they would go that route. But yeah, they're at that fork of the road. If you kick out the veteran, do you bring in another veteran, a la Kirk Cousins, or do you just go the youngster route? Or can you make a trade? If Tennessee's willing to bargain, like I heard yesterday, I don't know how realistic that is. Would Cleveland be willing to trade out of the number 2 pick if they feel like they can get a whole boatload and really just regroup and trade Myles Garrett as well and really kind of correct that situation in Cleveland? So we'll see. This is why you're the GM, right? You got chicken. You know what? You made chicken salad out of it.
Absolutely so. We'll see what those top 2 teams that seem to be quarterback needy, that would be the Titans and the Browns, want to do with their quarterback spots and what they want to do with their top 2 picks in the NFL draft. We have heard from Tennessee, based on reports, that new general manager, Mike Borgonzi, will listen to any potential trade offers for that first overall selection. Would the Jets be in the running? Do they have the capital necessary to make those deals? That we shall see. Scott, you mentioned Russell Wilson. You mentioned the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very interesting report earlier this morning about the quarterback spot. We'll talk about it next.
There's smart and there's not smart. Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Keep it here and win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
In 2007, the Mitchell Report is publicly released, listing the names of 89 Major League players linked to steroids.
For more than a decade, there has been widespread illegal use of anabolic steroids and other performance-enhancing substances by players in Major League Baseball.
Some of the game's best were mentioned, like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Sammy Sosa. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
Full self-driving cars are still not reality, but most modern vehicles now offer some kind of driving assistance, like lane keeping or automatic braking. New North Carolina State research tests 3 ways to get a distracted human driver to take control. Number 1, warning bells. 2, spoken instructions.
Please avoid the bridge abutment.
And number 3, a more conversational approach.
Tell me, what did you eat for lunch? By the way, that's a bus.
And the winner, conversation.
I'm not sure where we're going, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Follow me at Capalbo on X and stay tuned to The Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Carver and Lisi.
Totally pedestrian offensive line, and they got beat up by a younger, more hungrier crew. That's really what it came down to. You look at that front seven, those dogs, baby, those dogs were barking. Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. I mean, rah, rah, rah.
It's Carver and Lisi with Mike Carver and Joe Lisi. Weekdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go, there you are. Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge anywhere.
Even while the wife's talking to you.
If you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
So, Scott, earlier this morning, a very interesting report between 2 organizations in the quarterback spot, and a guy that we discussed at length yesterday that is about to welcome in a new head coach, seen as an offensive mind in Jacksonville. That would be Liam Cohen, trying to unlock Trevor Lawrence entering year number 5 of his NFL career. Of course, the former number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. Now, if I say the name Ryan Burr, that might not mean a lot to a lot of you. It's not Ian Rappaport. It's not Adam Schefter. It's not Jordan Schultz. It's not those usual NFL insiders. But Ryan Burr, longtime host for the Golf Channel, working for the Big Ten Network and ESPN and other variety of sports media outlets, had this report, Scott, earlier this morning around 8 a.m. Eastern. Steelers have made inquiries to the Jaguars about a trade for quarterback Trevor Lawrence. This directly from the horse's mouth in the Jags organization. Wow, is how Ryan Burr ended that tweet. Now, Ryan Burr, again, not your regular NFL insider, but a report that caught some flames on social media. Many people ran with it. Many people asked the question, would this actually be realistic? Could this possibly happen? In what world would the Jacksonville Jaguars want to trade Trevor Lawrence, a guy they just paid this past offseason, a 5-year, $275 million deal, at the time the richest in NFL history, to make him the face of the franchise for hopefully ever, but at least the foreseeable future? Scott, we have had some reports from that point from ESPN Jacksonville reporter who covers the team saying this is not going to happen. There's no chance the Jags are making this deal with the Steelers. But the fact it was even reported, even though it's not a usual NFL insider and reporter, is there smoke? Is there fire? Those are the questions that we ask here early in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, usually where there's smoke, there's some fire. I am a big believer in that. It may be a smoldering fire, right? And inquiries, right? That's the key word. That's the word that you circle in the report. We talked about this with one other report. I forget what it was. Could it be Pittsburgh called up and said, you know what? They're making phone calls all around the league. They got a list of 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks that they would be interested in. So they do their due diligence and say, hey, listen, you know what? Luka just got traded by the Dallas Mavericks. Anything can happen. So go pick up the phone, boys. Call these 5, 6, 7 teams that we would be interested in, and who knows? Maybe we spark an interest. Could it be something as simple as that, or was it an actual conversation where you discuss names and everything else? I'm guessing it's the latter. Now, why would Jacksonville leak that? And I get the sense it was Jacksonville, right? I don't know. Well, you know, maybe that's their way of telling the public, hey, this guy is actually available. But it wouldn't make sense, right? I mean, one, you just gave the guy all this money. All right, but different GM, different, head coach. But then you hire a guy seemingly to work with him. And that was last week. So what changed over the course of the week, right? Wasn't that the reason why you hired Cohen? Because you wanted to bring him in and work with Trevor Lawrence? So it doesn't make sense on paper, Ben. It really doesn't. But I wouldn't put past anything. Like I said, the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic. Anything can happen for the right price.
Yeah, Scott, I think it's a really good point. That key word being inquiries. And as we saw from the Ryan Burr report, he was saying that he had heard from Jacksonville, specifically Jacksonville. I know the Golf Channel studios are in Orlando. Not sure how close that is to Duval County. Maybe he knows some people that work with the Jags. I'm not entirely sure how he came to this information or how that information was distributed to him. Was it Jacksonville being like, dude, listen to this? The Steelers called us about Trev, and we hung up the phone immediately? Right. Could that have been it? To Scott's point, might Pittsburgh be calling a bunch of teams and be like, hey, just wanted to say, we've got this and this. Would you ever be interested? Doesn't mean that anything was on the table. Doesn't mean there was even a trade discussion more than like, hey, hope the offseason goes well. Doesn't mean a trade package by any means was actually presented. And as we are learning, ESPN's reporter for the Jags, Michael DeRocco, saying there's no chance this is going to happen. He a little bit more delved in probably to the inner workings of that organization than the initial report. It wouldn't make sense for Jacksonville to do it. It would be an awesome move for the Pittsburgh Steelers, we would think, at an upgrade at the quarterback spot. I do not think the Jags are going to make this trade. And Scott, even further complicated, the Jags don't have an actual GM right now. They're still doing the interviews to find the guy to work with Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence.
That's true. Who'd they talk to then, right? Right. But I think the good thing, if you're a Steeler fan, is, Ben, that they're looking to move on, right, from Justin Fields and Russell Wilson.
So that's the next angle of the conversation, because when a report happens, reporters want to be a part of the report and the fodder. We'll discuss next.
The winning edge. You've got it. But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us. But we're working on that. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Free agent third baseman Alex Bregman has signed a 3-year deal with the Red Sox worth a reported $120 million. He was the biggest free agent remaining on the market. Red Sox skipper Alex Cora wanted Bregman in the lineup. He coached him in Houston, where Bregman played 9 seasons. The Red Sox already have star Rafael Devers at third base, so where Bregman will play in the infield still needs to be resolved. Right-hander Nick Pivetta and the Padres have agreed to a 4-year, $55 million deal. It's pending following the completion of a physical exam. The veteran righty played the last 4 seasons for the Red Sox. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney was arrested last week in Georgia. He was booked in a Douglas County facility on February the 6th on counts of aggravated assault, strangulation, and obstructing, harassing 911 calls. Bundle auto and home, renters, or condo and save with Progressive.
That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Friday is Valentine's Day, so if you still have shopping to do, then it's time to get to Macy's, because we make finding the perfect gift so easy. How easy? We have last-minute gifts that feel truly thoughtful, like fragrance gift sets from Yves Saint Laurent, Carolina Herrera, and Marc Jacobs, boxed and ready to give. Yeah, it doesn't get much easier than that. So head to Macy's and make their Valentine's Day a little more special, and your life a little bit easier. But hurry in, because you're almost out of time. These deals end Friday at Macy's.
Progressive presents Renter's MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Joe Fallon's bedroom mini fridge. Sure, this pint-sized chiller's max capacity is 3 soda cans, but what it lacks in stature, it makes up in cooling strength. Each beverage a perfect 37 degrees every time. And the 2 feet Joe walks to get a drink, priceless. That's why his mini fridge is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
You're listening to SportsGrid,
Spreading the winning edge far and wide.
terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app.
Face it.
The winning edge is everywhere.
Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on FFC. It is Football Full Circle, all a part of the SportsGrid Radio Network. Scott, we just talked about the report from Ryan Burr, former Golf Channel host, and all of that about the Steelers making inquiries about Trevor Lawrence and his availability with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We don't believe that trade is going to happen. It has kind of been rebuked that anything would actually happen. And maybe a phone call can be called an inquiry, and it was just that and a nice chat and say, hey, we got some good golf here in Jacksonville if you want to come by this offseason. But as we said, why is that reported? Why is that information shared, if at all? Is it Jacksonville's way of saying, if the price was right, we'd think about Trevor Lawrence? Scott, you just looked at Trevor Lawrence's very large contract. At the time last offseason, matching Joe Burrow for the richest in NFL history. 5 years, $275 million, $55 million annually. Is it even realistic from a financial perspective that Jacksonville would consider moving on from Trevor Lawrence?
No, it's not. These numbers are true, and Spotrac is pretty good with their numbers. They would have a dead cap hit bet of $133 million. I mean, I didn't think I'd ever find a team that would be worse than the Cleveland Browns as far as dead cap hits with their quarterbacks, but we have one there with Jacksonville. That's what happens when you pay all the signing bonus. You know, you could spread that out if he's on your team, but if you get rid of him, that all comes to the surface. So 130, it'd be impossible. No, so it's not happening.
But it is interesting, Scott, right, that the Steelers might be doing this with a variety of teams and maybe even calling Jacksonville. It seems as though they're pretty set in stone. Liam Cohen trying to unlock Trevor Lawrence to make him be the prince that was promised, and we all believed he could be entering the NFL, and as he showed in glimpses during the 2022 NFL campaign. They still need to hire a GM. Those interviews in Duval County currently underway. So now to the Steelers component. If they're making inquiries with various teams around the NFL about quarterbacks and asking prices and all of that, Scott, does it tell us that Pittsburgh does not have its current quarterback from its current roster, or the guys who were there in 2024, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? There was a report from Albert Breer, who is an actual NFL insider for a variety of places, but namely Sports Illustrated and Amazon Prime's Thursday Night Football. And he was asked, Scott, better chance of Fields or Wilson or an outside free agent quarterback being the Steelers' starter? He said outside QB, then Fields, then Wilson. And that he had heard that during Super Bowl week and over the last few weeks of the offseason in Pittsburgh, the Steelers organization was growing a little bit tired of Russell Wilson, that Fields would be the front runner if anybody from the 2024 roster were to remain at the quarterback spot moving forward next year. That's a little bit of interesting info in what Pittsburgh might be doing to approach their quarterback question this offseason.
Yeah, listen, from what we got out of Mike Tomlin last year, this would be a 180-degree different opinion, right? Because he had every opportunity in the world to keep Justin Fields as his starting quarterback. He went 4-2. The team was obviously winning. But he steadfast said, nope, it's Russell's team, it's Russell's team, it's Russell's team. Then when they lose, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row to close out the regular season, who gets to start in the playoffs? It's Russell Wilson. So I find that hard to believe, unless there was just a change of thinking there. But otherwise, I think Fields would have gotten a better chance, last season if that's going to be the case. I don't think they go back to either one, to tell you the truth.
Right.
That 5-game losing. It's funny, Ben. The 5-game losing streak probably ended Russell's career with Pittsburgh, and then the 2-game losing streak for Sam Darnold probably ended his career with the Minnesota Vikings. Those last couple of weeks really kind of changed, I think, the thinking of both franchises with their starting quarterbacks.
No doubt. Probably cost Sam Darnold a decent amount of money, even if Minnesota was going to turn their attention to their first-round pick from this past year in J.J. McCarthy, now healthy, you would assume, entering his second year in the NFL. Both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are free agents this offseason. Scott, I'm not sure they retain either. I do not believe that either Wilson or Fields, if they stayed with the Steelers, would be the desired starter. There could be an argument to say that they would like to keep Justin Fields in-house to continue working with him because he is still young, and maybe they believe there is still some promising talent left for Justin Fields. Russell Wilson, at this stage of his career, you don't think you know something that you don't already know about what Russell Wilson can still provide at the quarterback spot. Could Russ be a stopgap for another team? Perhaps. If he is going to be signed this offseason, what exactly does he have in store for the remainder of his NFL career? That is a different conversation. It would seem clear, though, Scott, the Steelers need to address that quarterback position this offseason. So if you're looking around the NFL and you think of all of the teams with a quarterback question to be answered, including those in the NFL draft, Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets, I think I'm up to 5, the Saints, and now you could throw in the Pittsburgh Steelers, making that at least 7. The Falcons have their guy in Michael Penix Jr., but what becomes of Kirk Cousins? I think the Indianapolis Colts are going to give Anthony Richardson some run into the third year of his NFL career. I'm not sure they're in love with what that answer might be right now. But, Scott, there's probably 7 teams solidified in the fact that we could see a change at the quarterback spot, or at least a newcomer that would factor into that quarterback competition or decision-making.
Yeah, and then, do you have 7 names out there? I'll throw the usuals that you're going to hear for a number of different positions. Derek Carr available. You mentioned Kirk Cousins, right? Does Carson Wentz deserve another shot at least competing for a starting job? Jimmy G. I'm curious about Danny Nichols, as I like to call him, former Giants quarterback. What's the NFL's view of him? Does he get a second shot? Sam Darnold, and then, I know it's goofy, but if we're looking for homes for Aaron Rodgers, Pittsburgh would be a pretty good spot, right? A win-now team. They got some talent. The defense is terrific. You don't have to put 30 points on the board. Rough and tough division, I get that, but, that would be a spot where an Aaron Rodgers would seemingly have the fit.
For sure.
If you're going to go into the win-now situation with the Steelers.
I don't think the Jets are going to get anything in a trade for Aaron Rodgers. We assume he will be released post-June 1st to minimize the dead cap hit New York would have to take. Derek Carr is not a free agent. Kirk Cousins is not a free agent. If you want to get those names, you're going to have to trade something or their organization would be coughing up a lot of money in dead cap hits if they were to take it. For instance, Derek Carr, if released, Scott, even after June 1st this summer, more than $21 million in a dead cap hit for New Orleans, who, as we shared yesterday, is already $54 million into the red. They don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to the cap purgatory they are in. It does make it really interesting when you think of the names that are available, and they're not overly attractive in terms of, that guy makes us a playoff, division, conference, or Super Bowl contender by any means in a quarterback draft class that is not seen nearly as glowingly, Scott, as last year's was, that, of course, set a first-round record for 6 QBs gone in the first 32 picks.
Yeah. The benchmark of how desperate a team is, and I forget where he's even at, I have to admit, but the benchmark, Ben, is the good old reliable Jacoby Brissett. If he finds a job and he starts somewhere along the line, it seems like every single year this guy lands on a team that is desperate for a quarterback, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, whatever it is. If we find, him getting a job, then, these teams really are desperate. So there's too many holes and not enough pegs, as the saying goes, with these quarterbacks.
Yep. Jacoby Brissett, unrestricted free agent this offseason. Drake May, of course, is the future in Foxborough for the Patriots. We'll talk some other news around the National Football League, the Combine list, and some more not-so-great reports out of Cincinnati. That's next on Football Full Circle.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie. Just saying. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
This week, a Texas county approved holding an election sought by SpaceX that would let residents living around Elon Musk's company decide whether to formally create a new city called Starbase. This update brought to you by Sky Rizzy. Explore proven results with Sky Rizzy. The election was set for May 3rd, and votes can only be cast by residents living near the launch site that is currently part of an unincorporated area of Cameron County located along the U.S.-Mexico border. The port of Brunswick in Georgia became the top U.S. seaport for automobiles last year, surpassing the port of Baltimore after it shut down for weeks following the deadly bridge collapse. Georgia Ports Authority CEO Griff Lynch made the announcement during a luncheon speech in Brunswick, a small coastal city of 15,000 that state officials have turned into a leading gateway for automobile imports and exports, as well as farm and construction equipment. Brunswick's port moved 841,000 cars and trucks across its docks in the 2024 calendar year. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
If you love designer brands and you love clearance, then you're going to love this. Macy's is having a huge designer clearance event right now with incredible new designer markdowns on cold weather styles from BCBG, Hugo Boss, Michael Kors, and more. How big are the markdowns? How about Coach boots for $200 or less? So if you're looking for the things you love all in one place, come in and shop the designer clearance event at Macy's today. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
With Progressive's Name Your Price tool, you get coverage options based on how much you want to pay for car insurance. And then you decide how to spend the rest of your money because you're in charge. And right now, you're going to pay for groceries. But you decide what groceries. Just keep in mind you're running out of dishwashing soap. But you decide if you're going to buy that soap. It's just those dishes won't clean themselves, will they? Remember, with Progressive's Name Your Price tool, we'll help you find coverage at a fair price. And then you're in charge. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Not available in all states. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important. That's where we come in. SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning more often. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. Plenty of news and notes, even early in the offseason, all around the NFL. Scott, it's going to be an uneasy offseason ahead for the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that we have discussed this week that has seen their price already to contend for a Lombardi Trophy next season shortened since the market has been up in the last 2 to 3 days. Open at 24-1, now 18-1. The market optimistic about the Bengals having a bounce back with a healthy Joe Burrow. My hesitation is who is going to be there in Cincinnati on both sides of the football. Joe Burrow is set. T. Higgins is a free agent. Jamar Chase is under contract for one more year, but certainly will only be happy to come back to Cincinnati, Scott, with a large contract extension entering his 5th year in the National Football League. We have already heard from runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, Trey Hendrickson, after a great season in the National Football League, leading the NFL in sacks, and longtime Bengal who had been in Cincy for 6 years since he was drafted in the 3rd round out of NC State, one of the team's defensive captains and team leader in tackles this year in 2024. Jermaine Pratt, the linebacker, yesterday, Scott, officially requesting a trade out of Cincy. The Bengals have a lot of issues to deal with this offseason, extending new contracts, making sure they can pay people, which is not something that Mike Brown, team owner in Cincinnati, has often loved to do.
Yeah, you have your different levels of issues, right? Certain teams have issues of they don't have any players that are any good, right? That's not the Bengals issue. The Bengals issue is keeping the players happy, which is an issue around the NFL, right? But it's I think the lesser of two evils. I'd rather have this issue than going to try and find football players. I saw Joey B did an interview with the 4-Letter Network talking about how he's willing to restructure his contract in as many different ways. He can lower his salary cap hit because the contract they gave him, they didn't do a really good job, apparently, cap-wise. So, he was talking about different ways to lower his cap hit and even suggested giving money back. God forbid a football player should actually do that, right? So, and he praised the Philadelphia Eagles for doing it the right way. So hopefully they can keep these guys, Ben, because, we all kind of point to the Bengals as the team. That they've done it. They've beaten Kansas City. And if Kansas City opened the door this year, to other teams really becoming successful and getting to the Super Bowl, with them and Higgins and Chase, that's the combination you need. So you would think Cincinnati would find a way to get this job done. And now in the NFL especially, we're seeing more and more. You really do need two, maybe not number one wide receivers, but like with Philadelphia, Devontae Smith, is he a traditional number one? You can have that debate, but he's pretty damn close to A.J. Brown, right? You need two guys now. So I'd be disappointed if I was a Bengals fan, clearly, if they let Higgins walk without re-signing him. I would be not surprised, but I'd be disappointed if I'm a Bengals fan.
The Bengals are one of those unique teams, Scott, that really their ownership is only dedicated to the team itself. It wasn't a tech billionaire or some successful business person that bought into the franchise. Mike Brown is the son of Bengals co-founder Paul Brown. He has kind of inherited this organization. Duke Tobin is technically the director of player personnel, but acts as the de facto GM in Cincinnati, a position he has held since 1999. It's kind of been rinse, wash, and repeat for the Bengals. And to your point, what Joe Burrow was referencing in that interview, discussing his contract as he has been vocal in terms of making sure that the Bengals have talent around him, both offensively and defensively. He was very vocal during Super Bowl week, that being Joe Burrow, about making sure they can pay their best and brightest, like Trey Hendrickson. And it's really astute by Burrow, Scott, but you don't want your quarterback to also be your financial whiz and your GM. But basically what Joe Burrow is referencing is the way that you see a lot of these mega deals done that are structured differently. Here in the media, as fans take in what we describe, it is often the annual average value of a player's contract. It's the easiest way to do it. 4-year, $100 million. Guys making $25 million a year. It's not necessarily that cut and dry. It's not like they pay him $25 million up front. That's it. He gets his game checks, so on and so forth. There are signing bonuses, which allow you to pay a player up front, which they're all about. There's guaranteed money that could be backfilled. You can void a contract. You can defer payments until later in the duration of that contract to allow yourself outs. It is basically, as Joe Burrow was highlighting what the Eagles have done, they've done that offensively. They've got guys like Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith all paid. Their offensive line all paid because of how they structure their deals. Joe Burrow has a higher base salary than that of Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts actually makes more cash up front than that of Joe Burrow, and his cap hit is lesser because of how Howie Roseman has structured the deal, signing bonuses up front, all of that, so on and so forth. So Hurts has as much money in his bank account, but in terms of the contract and the salary cap space for his organization, it is structured differently. That is what Joe Burrow is referring to, basically to try to give the Bengals financial flexibility so that they can pay all their superstars and keep them there.
Yeah. The NFL has a pretty solid hard cap hit, but they've created so many loopholes to get around it that it's really a soft cap hit. And it's like we talked about with Trevor Lawrence, right? If they were going to trade him, his cap hit for next season is $17 million. I mean, how's that possible? He's the second highest paid player behind Dak now in the NFL, and yet he's got a cap hit of $17 million because you give money in signing bonuses. Now, eventually it's all got to come to roost, but there are ways around it, and there are ways around, spending money, and the winning teams will use those loopholes to spend money and sign guys. Yeah. The teams that really don't care about winning or don't use it as a high priority, we'll say, right, won't do that. They'll just say, as you mentioned, all right, you got a 4-year, $100 million contract, great. All right, $25 million each year, boom, we go from there. Whereas other teams will say, all right, we'll use $5 million this year, and we'll backload the other $95 million. We'll spread that out, and when it comes time to pay those, then we'll give you a contract extension so we can push that even further.
Right. It's all the financial acumen that you need, some of that creativity to make sure you can fill out the roster, and then you need to hit with a couple of draft picks like the Eagles did on the defensive side of the ball, and you pay them a discounted deal while they're still on their rookie contract. Plenty more around the NFL coming your way up next here on Football Full Circle.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the tickets.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. It is FFC. The offseason calendar continues to roll on. Scott, in just about 10 days, the NFL Eye will focus on Indianapolis for the annual scouting combine. And the NFL officially releasing the list of 329 prospects that have been invited to Lucas Oil Stadium for the 2025 Combine. All of those 329 players, of course, will pay attention to, but a couple of notable things I would say in that list, and we'll start with a guy that might be in consideration for the number 1 overall pick, top 3 pick at bare minimum. That would be the reigning Heisman winner out of Colorado in Travis Hunter, a two-way star at the collegiate level. He's got officially listed as a defensive back in the prospect list that went out today for the NFL Draft Combine. Not necessarily does he have to only play corner in the NFL, but it was important to note his distinction as a defensive back for Combine purposes in just a few weeks.
Yeah, it's funny. We all talk about, Deion and Shedeur Sanders, right? His son, and Deion doesn't want him to go to certain places and this and that. What about this kid? What if this kid says, you know what? I want to play both offense and defense in the NFL. I think I'm good enough to play wide receiver and defensive back. Will there be a team that says, no, we're not, is he going to tell that to teams in these interviews? Hey, don't draft me if I'm going to play only defense because I'm not going to be happy. So that's going to be interesting to see. Do they pick a side? Which side it'll be? What the distinguished defense is? He worth more to a team? If he had equal talent, then right? I think he's a little bit better defensive back than he is wide receiver.
Yes,
but if he had equal talent, I would think the offense would win out over the defense. But I do think, like I said, I think he's a little better defensive back than he is wide receiver.
He's a really, really good wide receiver. He was top 5 in the country in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns this season. He is an elite, in my estimation, cornerback when you look at the metrics and just how shut down he can be. They don't even want to throw it his way at times, Scott, because of how good he is in coverage. That's where I think he adds the most value to an NFL team. But is he in consideration for going first overall, top 3, top 5? Because he's just an elite shutdown cornerback? Or is he in consideration because an NFL team can dream of having him mostly play defense, not the even 50-50 split he did at Colorado, but mostly defense with a smidge of offense? I guess that's what we'll see, and those will be the Travis Hunter conversations to have in Indianapolis. At this moment, should be noted, Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami, minus 140. As the favorite to be the first overall pick. Now, Scott, we've talked about the Titans willingly listening to offers perhaps for that first overall selection. Cam Ward at minus 140 to be first overall doesn't mean the Titans have to make that selection. It just means Cam Ward hears his name called before anybody else in late April in Green Bay for the 2025 NFL Draft.
Right, and that's why I would not be betting on Travis Hunter or any other player to go number 1. I think that's just too valuable a position. If, in fact, Tennessee liked Travis Hunter, I think they would trade out of that spot.
Right.
Go call the Giants, go call the Raiders, go call whoever, and say, listen, we're willing to swap with you because we like, they're not going to tell this, but we like this guy. We know you're going to take the quarterback number 1. I'm curious to see with Jackson Dart how I think he's going to be the one. I think he's kind of borderline first round, and I'm not a draft Nick, but yeah. I think they consider him maybe late first round pick, Ben. Right? Maybe. I think he's going to shoot up the draft boards. I think he's going to be the one. I think you're going to end up with 3 quarterbacks taken in the top 10 pick, and he'll be the third one.
45-1, the price on Dart's got to be that first overall pick, but it is the 5th best number. As the markets continue to open up for the 2025 NFL Draft, around the Combine, we'll get the over-unders for the quarterbacks taken in the opening round, number 2 overall pick, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth as we get closer to April. One final bit of news, Scott, blending both the NFL and college football. Matt Patricia, former Lions head coach, longtime defensive coordinator in New England, hired as the new DC in Columbus for the reigning national champs in the Ohio State Buckeyes. Patricia making his way back to college.
Yeah, a little surprised, right? Wouldn't you have thought the connection with Mike Vrabel with New England that he would have brought him in? But I guess not. I tell you, I will say this about Ohio State real quickly. They go through these coordinators, but they bring in the big boys, right? They're not hiring a bunch of schmucks.
They certainly do. They have those NFL ties. We'll see if that pedigree and experience results in another dominant Buckeyes defense as they were this past year with Jim Knowles, who is now the defensive coordinator at Penn State. He's Scott Wetzel. I'm Ben Stevens. FFC returns tomorrow, noon Eastern time.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.